They always say the day you put on your graduation gown is the day you're finally seen. But for me, it was the day I realized I was invisible. My name is Calla Renshaw, and I grew up in a house that looked like love but felt like a locked door. My father, Graham Renshaw, owns half the shopping centers on the eastern seaboard. And my mother, Lorraine, knows every woman at the country club. By name, by secret, by scandal. And then there's my brother, Beckett, the golden child, the sun they orbit. Beckett's wedding was scheduled for the same day as my college graduation. I still remember how Mom announced it at the dinner table, her pearl earrings glinting under the chandelier's soft glow. "It'll be at the Hillside Chapel," she said, tapping her manicured nails against her wine glass. "April 22nd. Lovely spring blooms, just as Beckett wanted." I nearly choked on my salad. "April 22nd? But that's the day I graduate." Mom looked at me like I'd suggested moving the sun. Dad cleared his throat. Beckett didn't say a word. He just sat there, too busy scrolling through wedding cake designs on his phone. "Darling," Mom said, tilting her head. "Your ceremony is what, an hour? Maybe 2? This is Beckett's wedding. The whole family will be there for him. You understand, don't you?" I did. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just pretended to. Because the thing about being Calla Renshaw is that you learn how to nod when you're told to nod and smile when you want to scream. But in the weeks that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the seat they wouldn't fill, the stage I'd stand on alone, the photo I'd hold in trembling hands instead of hugging my parents after 4 years of surviving sleepless nights, endless lectures, and the suffocating fear that none of it mattered anyway. It all came to a head the night before graduation. My dorm room was a war zone of half-packed boxes and last-minute study notes. I called home one last time, hoping maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me. Beckett answered. I could hear the laughter of his fiancée Dana in the background, the clink of champagne flutes. "Hey, Beck," I whispered, my throat dry. "Is Mom there? Or Dad?" "Busy, Cal," he said. "You know tomorrow's the big day." "For you," I wanted to say, but the words withered. "I just wanted to wish you good luck." "Appreciate it. I'll tell Mom you called. Okay? Love you, kid." Click. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Then I curled up on my lumpy dorm mattress, graduation cap resting on my chest, and let myself be small. I'd spent my entire life fighting for their gaze, for their praise, and here I was, about to stand under the grand stone arches of Hartford University, my name echoing in a cathedral of strangers. The next morning, the sky was a clear blue. I walked alone across campus, cap bobbing in my hand, gown clutched to my side like a shield. The quad was blooming with parents balancing bouquets and siblings waving signs. I found my seat, row 12, seat 5, and stared at the empty folding chairs where my family should have been. My name was called. I rose. The world blurred, applause, but none of it for me. I clutched my degree like it might shatter. When I stepped down, I spotted Professor Ellison, the closest thing I'd ever had to a mentor. He gave me a hug that felt like it came from the universe itself. "They're missing out, Calla," he murmured. "You're going to go further than they could ever dream." I wanted to believe him. I really did. When I got back to my apartment that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Proud of you. We'll celebrate soon." No photo, no flowers on the counter. Just 4 hollow words. I dropped my keys, let my gown slip to the floor, and sat on my threadbare couch. The apartment smelled of old takeout and the scented candle I'd splurged on. Outside my window, the city lights blinked like indifferent stars. That's when my phone rang again. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe up. "Hello? Miss Renshaw?" The voice was crisp, confident, American, but with a hint of something older, something dignified. "Yes." "This is Marianne Hawthorne, assistant to the Dean of Development at Harvard University. We've been trying to reach your parents but haven't had any luck. May I ask, are you aware that they're one of our top donors?" My breath caught in my throat. I looked around my tiny apartment, the peeling paint on the walls, the unwashed dishes stacked in the sink. "Yes," I said slowly. Why? Because, Marianne continued, we have a situation that might be best handled by the family's next generation. Tell me, Kala, do you have time to talk? In that moment, a tiny ember flickered in my chest. Maybe they'd forgotten me today. But tomorrow? Tomorrow might be mine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I didn't sleep that night. The call from Harvard felt like a hand reaching down into the pit. I'd been digging for myself since the day my brother's wedding stole my moment. I made coffee that tasted like burnt hope and sat at my desk, staring at the city lights flickering through my dusty window. I kept replaying Marianne Hawthorne's words in my head. Asterix, the family's next generation. It sounded absurd, almost laughable. Me? The daughter they forgot? The daughter they left behind for a white rose bouquet and a 3-tier cake? But the ember had caught. And I wasn't about to let it die out. By sunrise, I'd pulled out the thick folder of Renshaw business paperwork my father made me sign every year. All those donor forms, trustee documents, and the emergency succession plans they'd paraded in front of Beckett while I got the courtesy copy. I dialed the number Marianne had given me. My thumb trembled over the call button. For a second, I thought about all the times I'd wanted to be needed by my parents. The school recitals they skipped. The high school science fair, where my volcano model exploded perfectly while they sat at Beckett's lacrosse game. The college acceptance letter I read alone on the front porch. Maybe this was just one more cruel trick, but maybe it was the door I'd been banging on my whole life finally cracking open. She answered on the first ring. Kala, good morning. I didn't expect you so early. I forced my voice to sound steady. You said you couldn't reach my parents. I thought maybe I could help. What's going on? I heard papers shuffling on her end, the click of her pen against a mug. Harvard relies on significant donors for major projects. The Renshaw family's endowment is tied to a new student innovation center. There's a slight complication. Your father signed an agreement giving your family naming rights in perpetuity. But there's a clause. If the funds are not renewed this quarter, the entire contract defaults. I squeezed the bridge of my nose. So? That sounds like Dad's problem. He can write a check. Silence. Marianne cleared her throat. Mr. Renshaw hasn't been reachable. Our finance office tried his business lines. His legal team says he's traveling. The deadline is in 3 days. If the default happens, it affects not just the name but their status, reputation, tax positions. I thought, given your name is on the secondary trustee line, you might have an interest. What I had was a tidal wave of fury that tasted too much like vindication. I'll come in today. Send me the paperwork. It felt like I'd swallowed the sun. My heart slammed against my ribs. All those years of being the backup plan. Now they'd learn what happens when the backup stops waiting around. I showered, brushed my hair until it shone like something fresh, alive. I put on the one blazer that didn't make me feel like an imposter. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not the girl crying under her graduation cap, but a woman with a pulse. A plan. The cab ride to Harvard's development office was a blur of honking horns, and the ghost of my father's voice echoing in my ears. Asterisk, stay in your lane, Kala. Let Beckett handle the big things. The receptionist eyed me curiously as I gave my name. A few minutes later, Marianne appeared, an elegant woman with hair like polished silver and eyes that missed nothing. She ushered me into a glass-walled conference room that smelled faintly of old wood and ambition. Thank you for coming, she said, sliding a thick stack of papers toward me. Here's the situation in detail. The numbers made my head spin. Millions promised. Millions unpaid. Millions that could vanish into legal hell if someone didn't sign the right line. And at the end of every page, my father's signature, Beckett's initials, and mine, scribbled years ago when they told me to, just sign this, honey. It's for family protection. I looked up. If I step in, what does that make me? Marianne's lips curved. Powerful. Indispensable. Visible. Visible. God, that word. I signed the temporary trustee authorization before I could second-guess it. I didn't trust my father to show up. I didn't trust Beckett to pick up his phone, not when he'd just started his honeymoon in Santorini. But I did trust myself. Maybe for the first time ever. When I walked out, my phone buzzed. "Mom, where are you? We've been calling." I nearly laughed right there on the Harvard steps. Now they notice. I called her back, let her voice flood my ear like a cold river. "Calla, where are you? Beckett says you missed the wedding brunch. You know the family photos were today. We're heading to the airport." "Mom, the Harvard endowment is about to default." Silence. "What?" "Dad's unreachable. I'm here. I've handled it. You're welcome." She sputtered something about lawyers, about how I should have waited, but I didn't care. I hung up, turned my phone off, and stared up at the ancient red brick towers of Harvard. The weight of my family's indifference felt lighter than it ever had. When I got back to my apartment, my neighbor, an old retired teacher named Mr. Doyle, knocked on my door. "Got your mail by mistake, Calla." He handed me a fat envelope with the Harvard crest. I thanked him, shut the door, and ripped it open. Inside, an official invitation to meet the Dean of Development. An opportunity to sit at a round table with other donors' heirs. An unspoken promise that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. But as I placed the letter on my desk, my phone buzzed to life. A voicemail from Dad. "Calla, we need to talk. You've overstepped. There are things you don't understand. Don't do anything else. I'm coming home." And just like that, the ember turned into a bonfire. Let him come. Let him see me now. I was done waiting for an invitation. And when Harvard called again, they wouldn't be asking for Graham Renshaw, they'd be asking for me. I barely slept again. Dad's voicemail kept repeating in my head. That sharp edge in his voice. The warning that I'd overstepped. As if stepping into the gap he'd left was some unforgivable sin. As if all the years I spent invisible didn't earn me this moment to breathe fire into my own name. I woke up to the smell of stale coffee and a pit of nerves rolling in my gut. The invitation from Harvard sat on my desk like a dare. Roundtable for Young Philanthropists. It wasn't just about writing checks. It was about connections, about influence, about standing shoulder to shoulder with people who'd never forget my name again. My phone buzzed just after 7. Unknown number. I let it ring out, then it came again. Same number. On the third try, I picked up. "Calla? It's Marianne. Sorry for the early call, but I have news." My heart skipped. "Is it the funding?" "No. That's handled, thanks to you. But the dean would like you to meet a few people at the round table tomorrow. It's a chance to solidify your position as acting trustee. You'll need to prepare a short statement. It's a big deal. A statement." Suddenly, my mind filled with all the half-finished essays I'd written late at night, the presentations I'd given while Mom dozed off in the front row, the words I'd choked on every time Dad made Beckett speak for me. "I'll be ready," I lied, my stomach nodding. After the call, I sat at my rickety kitchen table, pen-tapping a mug ring on my notepad. I wrote, "Who is Calla Renshaw?" Then I crossed it out. Too pathetic. I wrote, "Why does Harvard need me?" Then I crossed that out too. What they really wanted was the money, but what I wanted was something more ferocious. I wanted them to remember me as the one who didn't flinch when the spotlight finally landed where it should have been all along. I spent the day poring over Dad's old donation letters, hunting for the language he used to keep people close. Come via partnership, legacy, impact, words he'd wielded like a sword while I stood in his shadow. Late that night, I stepped out for air. The streets were quiet, city lights dripping down the pavement like spilled gold. I ended up at a tiny cafe that stayed open for night owls like me. I ordered black coffee and a croissant I couldn't afford. I spread my notes across the table and let my thoughts spill out. I'm not Beckett. I'm not Graham. I'm not just a signature on a line. I am here. I am the one who stayed when everyone else turned their backs. I am the one who picked up the phone when Harvard called. I am not a placeholder. I am not an afterthought. When the cafe closed, I gathered my scraps of paper, stuffing them into my bag with trembling hands. Outside, the wind bit at my cheeks, but my skin felt alive for the first time in forever. The next morning, I took the train to Cambridge early. The campus buzzed with students, laughter, ambition. I walked into the development office, my statement printed neatly on fresh paper, my heartbeat pounding like a war drum. Marianne greeted me at the door, eyes flicking over my blazer and the nervous clutch of my hands. "You'll do fine. They like authenticity, and you have that in spades." I nodded, swallowing the acid taste of doubt. The round table was in a grand conference hall, all glass and oak and impossible ceilings that made you feel small, unless you decided you wouldn't be small anymore. They sat us in a circle, 10 next-generation heirs. There was Theo Langley, whose family owned half the real estate downtown. Mara Jensen, who'd started an environmental nonprofit before she could legally drink. Each face polished, confident, expensive. When my turn came, I stood, knees trembling under the table. "Good morning. I'm Calla Renshaw. My family has been involved with this university for decades, but today I stand here not just as my father's daughter, but as myself. I believe that philanthropy should mean more than signatures and plaques. It should mean showing up when it's inconvenient. It should mean using the privilege you are handed to create opportunities for those who are handed nothing. That's what I did when my family couldn't or wouldn't answer your call. I did it because I believe that this place can stand for more than just the names carved on its walls. It can stand for the people who build it every single day." I finished. Silence. Then applause. Polite, restrained, but it made my skin buzz. Marianne's approving nod from across the room felt like a lighthouse. Afterwards, there was coffee and networking. Mara cornered me near the pastry table. "I liked what you said. It wasn't just PR fluff," she said. "You've got guts. Want to grab lunch next week? I'd love to hear your ideas." I gave her my number, the thrill of it humming under my ribs. I imagined telling Beckett that the people he'd always brushed elbows with were now inviting 12 to the table. As the room emptied out, Marianne approached. "There's one more thing. The dean would like to invite you to the annual donor gala next month. It's not just a social event. It's a chance to show the board that you're serious about taking on more responsibility. Will my parents be there? They're on the list, but you'd be seated at the head table." I pictured Dad's face. Beckett's smug grin slipping. Mom's fingers clenching her pearls. Good. Let them see me. That night, I called Dad back for the first time. He answered immediately. "Calla. Good, you called. We need to sort this mess out." "It's not a mess, Dad. I handled it. I'm meeting with the board. I'm going to the gala." His silence was thunderous. "You have no idea what you're doing. This is bigger than you think." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, voice steelier than I'd ever heard it. "I'm done being your afterthought." And before he could throw his old excuses at me, I ended the call. My hands shook as I set the phone down. But inside, I was something I'd never been before. Unafraid. I didn't know what would happen at the gala. I didn't know how my family would try to pull me back into my place. But I knew this much. They'd have to see me now. And I wasn't leaving that room quietly. The week leading up to the donor gala felt like the longest week of my life. Every morning, I woke with my stomach knotted, half excited, half terrified. It was the first time in my life that I was stepping into a room my parents owned, and daring to claim a piece of it for myself. The invite from Harvard came in an embossed envelope, thick as a wedding invitation. I smoothed my fingers over the golden lettering. Annual Donor Gala, Cambridge Clubhouse. I could practically see Dad's face when he realized I wasn't just crashing his party. I was invited to the head table. Marianne called to walk me through the logistics. "The dean wants you to be prepared to speak, Calla. Just a few words, but the board will be there. It's your chance to show them you can handle this." "Handle it," I repeated, the words heavy on my tongue. As if handling my family hadn't been my job since the day I learned to hold my breath when Dad's mood turned sharp or Mom's eyes turned glassy with disappointment. I spent 3 nights rehearsing. By the 4th, I'd shredded every draft. I needed the words to feel like mine, not something Dad would have forced into my mouth. In the end, I scribbled one line at the top of a blank page. They will see me. When the night finally came, I borrowed a dress from Mara. She'd become an unexpected ally, sending me pep talk texts and checking my speech drafts. She even sent her stylist to help tame my hair into sleek waves that made me feel like a different version of myself, one who deserved to stand in the center of a marble ballroom instead of lurking on its edges. The Cambridge clubhouse was lit up like a cathedral of glass. The valet took my coat, his eyes flicking over my name on the guest list. Inside, the foyer was a swirl of gowns and tuxedos, champagne glasses clinking like wind chimes in the warm air. I found my name on the head table place cards. M's Calla Renshaw, not Graham's daughter, not Beckett's sister, just me. I hadn't seen my parents yet. Part of me wondered if they'd even come. Maybe they'd refuse to witness my small rebellion. But then, just before dinner was announced, I felt the shift in the air. Conversations slowed, heads turned, and there they were, Dad in his black tux, hair slicked back like the king of his own empire. Mom shimmering in emerald silk, her hand looped through his arm like an ornament. Beckett trailed behind them, freshly tanned from Santorini, his smile tight when he caught my eye. They saw my place at the head table. They saw me. I swear for a second, Dad's eyes flashed with something that looked like fear. I sipped my water to keep my hands from trembling. The Dean of Development tapped his glass. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. We have a few brief remarks before dinner. My parents were seated near the front, but not at my table. I watched Mom whisper something to Dad. He didn't respond. Beckett caught my eye again and looked away first. The Dean rose. He gave his usual speech about legacy, vision, the future. Then he gestured for me to stand. And now, one of our youngest trustees, whose swift action ensured our newest innovation center remains on track, Ms. Calla Renshaw. I stood, the blood roaring in my ears. The room blurred. An ocean of glittering eyes, hushed murmurs. I held the mic like a lifeline. I'm honored to stand here tonight, I began, voice steady despite the tremor I felt under my skin. When Harvard called my family for help, they couldn't reach my parents. They couldn't reach my brother. But they did reach me. And when they did, I showed up. Because that's what we're meant to do when we talk about legacy. It's not about names on a plaque or a wing of a building. It's about showing up, even when no one expects you to. Especially when no one expects you to. A murmur ran through the crowd. I let my eyes drift to where Dad sat, his jaw tight. Mom's hand was frozen on her wine glass. Beckett's expression was unreadable. I hope we remember that tonight, I finished. Thank you for believing in me. Polite applause. Some genuine, some surprised. I handed back the mic and sank into my chair. Marianne squeezed my shoulder as she passed behind me, her smile warm, approving. Dinner passed in a blur. Donors I'd only read about in trade magazines stopped by my table, introducing themselves, asking about my ideas. For the first time, my voice didn't feel like a borrowed thing. It felt like mine. But when dessert was served, a tower of chocolate mousse and spun sugar, I felt the shift again. Dad was standing beside my chair, his hand resting on the back like he owned the whole damn building. Calla, step outside with me. I felt the curious eyes of the other donors. The last thing I wanted was a scene. I stood, lifting my napkin from my lap like a flag of surrender. He led me into a side corridor lined with oil portraits of past benefactors, their painted eyes watching us like ghosts. Your little stunt, Dad said, voice low and sharp, has put us in a difficult position. I folded my arms. Which part? Saving your contract? Speaking my mind? Or the fact that I'm not letting you shove me back in a corner anymore? He stepped closer. The smell of his cologne, woodsy, expensive, filled the space between us. This isn't your world, Calla. You don't know what you're doing. You think these people respect you? They're laughing at you. They see a girl playing at power. Funny, I shot back. my voice trembling with a rage that felt like freedom. Because tonight, they called Sami. Not you. His eyes narrowed. You think you can hold this? The money? The contracts? The board votes? You're not ready. You're just a placeholder until Beckett takes over, and you know it. The word placeholder made something in me snap. I leaned in until our noses nearly touched. Then watch me prove you wrong. I turned and walked back into the ballroom before he could say another word. Beckett was standing near the bar, watching the exchange. Our eyes met. For the first time, I saw something almost like respect flicker in his face. Or maybe it was fear. I didn't care. I took my seat. The band started to play, people drifted toward the dance floor. Marianne leaned in. Well done. They're already talking about you for the Young Trustees Council. You made an impression tonight. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to cry. I wanted to tell her that I hadn't made an impression in my own family for 23 years. And now I'd done it in 23 minutes. When I left the gala that night, the city air smelled sweeter than it ever had. I hailed a cab, slipped off my heels, and rested my forehead against the cool window. Somewhere in that ballroom, my father was stewing, my mother was scandalized, and Beckett was probably scheming. Let them. I'd tasted what it felt like to stand on my own, and I wasn't about to give it back. The next morning, I woke to an email from Harvard's board secretary. Would you be interested in chairing the Young Trustees Council this quarter? The words blurred as tears pricked my eyes. Not Dad, not Beckett. Me, I hit reply. Yes, I'm ready. But as I sent the message, a new one popped up from an unknown address. The subject line made my stomach clench. Family trust inquiry. It was from a junior associate at Dad's law firm. Apparently, someone was trying to challenge my trustee authority, a legal move to cut me out before I could cement my place. I laughed, a sound half wild in my tiny apartment. Of course they would come for me now. Good. Let them. I cracked my knuckles, opened a fresh notebook, and started planning. This wasn't just about a gala or a plaque on a wall anymore. This was war. I spent the entire night pacing my apartment, legal papers spread across my tiny kitchen table. Every shadow on the wall looked like my father's disappointment glaring down at me. But I didn't flinch this time. They wanted to shut me up, push me back behind the curtain, but they didn't realize they'd raised a daughter who learned how to fight in the dark. By dawn, I had memorized every clause in the trust agreements. I'd called Marianne 3 times, and each time she picked up like she was waiting for my fear to crack. But I didn't break. I asked questions. I took notes. I built a fortress out of my own determination. The knock on my door came just before 9. I knew it would. I peered through the peephole, and there was Beckett, perfect as always, his suit jacket draped over his shoulder like a prince slumming it in the real world. I didn't open the door right away. I made him wait. When I finally let him in, he looked around my cramped studio like he might catch something contagious. Kala, he said, voice slick as oil, we need to talk. Do we? I asked, folding my arms. Or are you here to deliver Dad's latest threat? He set his jacket on the back of my couch, sighing like I was being unreasonable. You're out of your depth. You don't know what you're doing. This isn't about you. It never was. The family trust is complicated. Complicated, I repeated, the word burning my tongue. You mean the same trust Dad used to control everyone in this family? The same one that says if you fail, it passes to me? Surprise, Beck. I read the fine print. He rolled his eyes. You think a few signatures make you powerful? You think Harvard cares about you beyond the money? They'll eat you alive. Dad's giving you an out. He's willing to buy you out, Kala. Walk away with a nice check, disappear. It's cleaner for everyone. I barked a laugh that sounded foreign in my own throat. Cleaner for you, you mean? No sister to embarrass you at the next gala. No sister to remind you that you're not the only Renshaw with a backbone. His jaw clenched. Don't make this ugly. It already is, I said, stepping closer so he could see the wildfire in my eyes. You made it ugly the second you all chose a wedding over my graduation. The second you left me to stand alone on that stage. I'm not the weak link anymore, Beckett. I'm the contingency you never saw coming. We stared each other down in the stale light of my living room. Then he smiled. Fake, brittle. You want to play at this? Fine. But you're not ready. The lawyers will bury you. The board will lose faith in you. You'll wish you took the check. Tell Dad I said no, I snapped. And Beckett? Tell him I'm just getting started. He left without another word. I sank onto the couch, my pulse hammering so hard I thought my ribs might crack. I let the fear wash over me. Then I let it go. When my phone buzzed, it was Mara. I hadn't told her everything yet, but she knew enough. Come over, she said. No questions, just certainty. You shouldn't do this alone. I packed up my trust documents, grabbed my laptop, and rode the subway to her place in Cambridge. She opened the door in sweatpants and a Harvard hoodie, her living room a battlefield of legal pads and law textbooks. You look like you haven't slept in a week, she said, handing me coffee. Which is good. Angry exhaustion looks amazing on you. We spent hours hunched over my case. Mara connected me with her friend Sasha, a junior associate at a cutthroat law firm. Sasha tore through my father's trusty loopholes with a grin that made me believe in goddesses of vengeance. They'll try to prove you're incompetent, Sasha said. Or unstable. Or both. They can't erase your signature, but they can argue you acted without full understanding of the obligations. So you need to show you're capable and public. Public, I echoed. My stomach flipped. So I need press. Exactly, Mara said. They love you at Harvard now. Use it. Do interviews. Talk about your vision. Make them look like bullies if they come for you. Once you're in the light, they can't drag you back into the dark. It felt like whiplash. Me, the family ghost, now forced to be loud. But I didn't flinch. I made a list. Local papers, business journals, alumni magazines. I booked interviews. I wrote op-eds. I spoke about philanthropy, about showing up, about legacies built on more than money. Somewhere between the 4th interview and the 100th cup of coffee, I realized I didn't need to make them see me as powerful. I already was. One night, Mara and I sat on her rooftop, city lights blinking around us like fireflies. You're going to win this, she said, pressing a mug into my hands. You think? She grinned. No, I know. When I got home that night, I found an envelope wedged under my door. No stamp, no address. Inside, a single sheet of thick paper. Kola, don't do this. You'll regret it. No signature, but I didn't need one. It was Dad's handwriting. For a second, the old panic rose in my throat. But then I tore it in half, then quarters, then confetti. A week later, Harvard's student paper ran a front-page story. Renshaw heiress steps up. Kala Renshaw reshapes family legacy. The photo was terrible. My hair frizzed from the rain, my eyes ringed with exhaustion. But I'd never seen myself look so alive. A few hours after it dropped, my phone buzzed with a message from Beckett. You made your point. Now come home. I didn't reply. I just smiled. That night, Marianne called. I just wanted you to know the board's impressed. They're considering a proposal for you to take on a permanent seat. Not just young trustees, full board. My heart slammed against my ribs. They're serious? They're serious. But Kala, this won't make your family go quietly. They'll come for you. Harder than before. Good, I said, my voice low and certain. Let them try. If there's one thing I learned about the Renshaws, it's that they don't lose gracefully. The morning after my name hit the student paper, my father's lawyer called. He wanted to discuss the terms of the trust. Discuss. Like I hadn't spent 2 weeks memorizing every comma they'd buried to keep people like me quiet. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sat with Mara and Sasha in a cramped cafe, our table buried under sticky notes and legal pads. Outside, Cambridge was waking up in slushy spring rain, but inside my blood was fire. They want you to panic, Sasha said, tapping her pen against the table. But we're not playing defense. We go bigger. Bigger? I asked. My voice cracked from exhaustion. Or excitement. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Think public. A public statement of intent. Take control of the narrative. Announce your vision. Let them try to say you're incompetent when you're out here hosting panels and doing interviews like you're the second coming of Bill Gates. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, a drip of water tapping on the window beside me. If I do that, there's no coming back. There's no pretending we're a happy family. Mara snorted. Was there ever? She had a point, so I did it. I wrote an open letter. 20 drafts, 2 breakdowns, 3 cups of burnt diner coffee. But when I read the final version aloud to Mara, I didn't stutter once. To the students, faculty, and supporters of Harvard, asterisk. Cell asterisk. My name is Kala Renshaw. You may know my family's name, but you don't know me. Not yet. My father built a legacy of wealth. My brother built a legacy of charm. I intend to build a legacy of showing up when it counts. Some people inherit power and use it to protect themselves. I intend to use it to protect others. This is not just about money. This is about accountability, innovation, and a promise that no student will be invisible the way I once was. They say your past defines you. I say you define your past. This is just the beginning, Staus. When I posted it, I expected backlash. Instead, I got a flood of emails. Messages from students who'd spent years ignored by the same ivory towers my parents used like trophies. Small donors who wanted to help. Journalists asking for interviews. The next day, my father's lawyer called again. This time, I answered. Miss Renshaw, he said, voice tight like his tie. Your father is requesting a family meeting. He believes this has gone far enough. I laughed. Does he? Well, I believe it's just getting interesting. When I hung up, my phone buzzed again. Beckett, this time. Family brunch tomorrow. Dad wants you there, 10 a.m. Don't be late, Sting. Family brunch. Like we were going to sip mimosas and pretend they hadn't tried to erase me for a decade. Mara drove me to our childhood house the next morning. The Renshaw mansion sat behind iron gates that felt more like prison bars than protection. I sat in her car, staring at the grand front doors. You don't have to go in there alone, she said. Yes, I do. She squeezed my hand. Then promise me one thing. You walk out the same way you walk in. No bowing your head, no apologies. I promised. Inside, everything smelled the same. Polished floors, fresh lilies, lies and stale secrets. Beckett was lounging on the velvet sofa, scrolling through his phone. Mom perched by the window, her pearls tight around her throat. Dad stood by the fireplace like a king about to deliver judgment. Kala, he said, sit. I didn't. I stayed standing, arms crossed. Do you understand what you've done? He began. You've made this family a public spectacle. You've humiliated your brother. You've embarrassed your mother. And for what? A moment in the spotlight? For the truth, I shot back. For every moment you looked through me like I was glass. For the stage you left empty on my graduation day. Mom sniffed, dabbing her eyes with a linen handkerchief. Darling, you're blowing this out of proportion. We're family. We need to handle this quietly. I almost laughed. Quiet is your favorite word, isn't it? Quiet when Beckett screws up. Quiet when Dad lies. Quiet when I bleed. Beckett stood, his grin oily. You think these people really care about you? They care about the money. The second you stop writing checks, you're nothing. Then I guess I'll just keep writing them, I said, voice steady. But not for you, not for this house, for the students who need it. Dad slammed his palm on the mantel. You're reckless, you're naive. You think you can do this alone? I stepped closer, feeling the heat of the fire at my back. No, I know I can't. That's why I have people who believe in me, who see me, something you never did. He sneered. I made you, don't forget that. No, I said, the words tasting like freedom. You made Beckett, I made myself. I turned and walked out. Mara was waiting in the car. I didn't look back. Back in my apartment, I found a letter slipped under my door again. This one wasn't from Dad. It was from Harvard's board. We'd like you to co-chair the new innovation grant. We believe you're the right voice to shape it." I sat on the floor, legs crossed, letter pressed to my heart. For the first time, I felt the future stretching out before me. Wild, uncertain, but mine. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. This was far from over. I didn't sleep the night after the family brunch. The argument replayed in my head on a loop. Dad's rage, Beckett's smirk, Mom's whispered excuses that tasted like old dust in my mouth. But I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like the ghost they'd left behind. I felt like the girl who finally kicked down the door they'd locked for years. Mara stayed on the phone with me until 3 a.m., her voice a steady hum over the static of my thoughts. "They're scared of you, Calla. That's why they're pushing back so hard. You're not the easy target they remember. You're unpredictable now. That terrifies them." I let her words wash over me as I watched headlights crawl across my ceiling. I thought about the trust fund. The seat on the board. The students who'd already reached out to say, "Thank you for speaking up." Maybe I hadn't chosen this fight. But I sure as hell wasn't backing down now. The next day, I stood in the cold outside Harvard's Innovation Center, waiting for the first meeting with the dean. It was the same building my family's name was carved into, a giant stone testament to their ego. But today, I wasn't there to play their part. I was there to write my own lines. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with quiet conversation. The dean smiled when he saw me, a real smile, not the polite mask I'd grown up with. "Calla, glad you could make it. We're all eager to hear your thoughts on the new student grant program." I took my seat, ignoring the eyes that flicked to me. Some curious, some skeptical. I laid out my ideas: smaller, more flexible funding for first-generation students. Emergency stipends for students who couldn't call home for help because Torrey Home Doc was the problem. A mentorship network for kids like me who'd never had someone in their corner until it was almost too late. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the older board members, a man whose last name was on 3 separate campus buildings, cleared his throat. "Ambitious," he said, not unkindly. "But what makes you think you can pull this off, Ms. Renshaw? You're young. This is bigger than a few news stories." I didn't flinch. Because I know what it's like to be overlooked. And I know how much louder you can be when you're underestimated. A few people laughed. Warm. Genuine. The dean nodded. "We'll vote on the grant this quarter. In the meantime, we'd like you to present your vision at the donor retreat next month." Donor retreat. Another room full of my father's old allies. Another chance for him to try and clip my wings. But I wasn't afraid of his shadow anymore. When I stepped out into the cold again, I felt like my feet didn't touch the ground. I called Mara before I even reached the curb. "They want me to pitch at the retreat," I said, breathless. "Good. Let them see the hurricane they've unleashed." But the high didn't last long. That night, an email hit my inbox like a sucker punch. It was a notice from my father's legal team, formal petition to contest your role as co-trustee on the grounds of misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. They were really going for the jugular now. I forwarded it to Sasha, who replied instantly, "We expected this. You're not alone. Call me." When we got on the call, her voice was calm. "They'll push this as far as they can. But we push back harder. You're not acting outside your rights, they know it. But they're hoping you'll get scared and settle." "Don't." "I won't," I said. But my hands were shaking. Sasha laid out the next steps. Depositions, hearings, endless paperwork designed to bleed me dry of time and spirit. But every time I felt the edge of panic, I pictured Dad's face at the fireplace, spitting the words, "I made you." No, I thought. You made me fight. Mara made me tea while we drafted my official statement. We hit them where it hurts. Public opinion. They want this quiet. Force them to do it under the spotlight. So I did. I gave another interview, this time to the Boston Globe. I told them about the trust, the gala, the students who'd written to me. I didn't trash my family. I didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than any insult. A week later, the piece went viral. Asterisk Trust Fund torn apart. The Renshaw heir who won't stay quiet. The comments were a wildfire. Some people called me spoiled, attention-seeking. Others called me brave, relentless. For the first time, the word invisible was nowhere to be found. The night before the first hearing, I sat on my couch, staring at the marble notebook where I had scribbled my speech ideas. I didn't know what the judge would ask. I didn't know what my father's lawyers would throw at me, but I knew this much. They'd have to look me in the eye now. Marianne called just as I was about to go to bed. "I've spoken to the board. They stand with you. You're not just a name on the letterhead anymore, Culla. You're a real voice in this. Don't forget that tomorrow." I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, the hum of the city outside my window, my heart drumming against my ribs like a battle cry. When I walked into that courthouse the next morning, Dad was already there, Beckett at his side, suit perfect, hair perfect, grin sharp as a dagger. Mom wasn't there. She never did like mess. Dad didn't look at me as I took my seat across from him. Good. Let him look at the judge instead when they asked him why he thought his daughter was unfit to carry the legacy he'd abandoned, the second it stopped shining for him. When my lawyer asked me to stand, I did it without trembling. I spoke clearly. I didn't apologize. I didn't flinch when Dad's lawyer read out my reckless actions, the donations, the press statements, the meetings I'd taken without his blessing. Every offense sounded like proof I was exactly who I said I was. The Renshaw who showed up when no one else did. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Mara was there, shoving a cup of coffee into my hand before I could say anything. "You did it," she said. "Win or lose. They can't put you back in that box now." The judge's ruling would take weeks. Weeks where my father would keep pushing, Beckett would keep smiling like a shark, and I'd keep standing my ground. One night, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single line scrawled in Dad's handwriting. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Asterisk." I pinned it to my fridge like a trophy. Good, I thought. Neither am I. I thought I'd feel relief after that first hearing, but instead it felt like standing on a cliff, wind whipping at my hair, every step forward, one heartbeat away from a fall. My father had always known how to pull the ground out from under me. I'd spent my whole life pretending the drop didn't scare me. Now, for the first time, I didn't want to pretend. I wanted to build wings instead. Mara moved into my apartment for the week that followed. She said it was just so I'd eat and sleep, but I knew it was because she could see the cracks I tried so hard to hide. Some nights, I woke up gasping, dreams of empty stages and empty chairs tangling my sheets around me like a straitjacket. She'd just pass me her mug of tea and remind me, "You are not the girl who needs them to clap for you anymore, Culla. You clap for yourself now." Harvard's donor retreat loomed like a storm cloud. Invitations started hitting inboxes, and I watched the social pages light up with speculation. Would the Renshaw air show? Would she bring her family? Had she really turned her back on them for good? Mayans key. They didn't get it. I hadn't turned my back on them. They'd turned theirs on me a long time ago. All I'd done was stop chasing the shadows they left behind. Marianne called 2 days before the retreat. "You're still ready for this?" she asked, her tone gentle, like she was bracing for me to crumble. "I'm more than ready," I said, tracing my fingers over the copy of my speech. "I'm not showing up for them. I'm showing up for the kids who'll come after me." The day of the retreat, Cambridge was drowning in spring rain. I wore a navy suit, borrowed from Mara's closet again. The sleeves a little too long, but the shoulders perfect, like armor stitched together by someone who believed I could survive this. The old estate Harvard rented for the retreat looked like something out of my mother's bridal magazines. Polished wood, ivy crawling up stone walls, too many mirrors. My reflection followed me down every hallway like a ghost. But this time, I didn't feel like the one haunting the house. I felt like the exorcist. Inside the main hall, donors milled around in designer suits, balancing flutes of champagne like trophies. I found my place card at the front table. Torzamas Culla Renshaw, co-chair, innovation grant, no mention of Dad, no mention of Beckett, just me. I stood behind my chair for a moment, steadying my breath. Then the doors swung open and in they walked. Dad, Beckett, and Mom, the picture of practiced perfection. Mom's eyes flicked to me once before she turned to air-kiss some oil tycoon's wife. Beckett just smirked, but Dad looked at my nameplate like it was an insult carved in stone. When the speeches began, I barely heard the first three. My heart was hammering so loud I thought the whole room could hear it. Then the dean's voice cut through the fog. Tonight, you'll hear from the student who stepped up when no one else did. The student who reminded us what our future should look like. Calla Renshaw. I took the stage. No notes this time. Just the truth. When I was 12, I watched my father write a check bigger than my entire college tuition to fund this university's newest wing. I asked him what he was buying. He said, a legacy. But I think he was wrong. I think you don't buy a legacy, you build one. Brick by brick. Student by student. Moment by moment when you decide to show up. Even when it's not convenient. Even when it's not pretty. Even when no one's clapping. I felt every eye on me, but I kept going. My family name might be on the stone, but the real legacy is the kids in the dorms who feel invisible until someone looks them in the eye and says, I see you, you matter. That's what this grant will do. That's what I'm here to do. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole hall erupted. Over the roar, I caught Dad's face, white as salt, lips pressed so tight they disappeared. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand. Some donors offered to match the grant's funding. A few asked about my next move, like I was suddenly a brand they wanted to invest in. Mara would have laughed. Next move? I was just trying to hold my nerve long enough to keep my world from collapsing. In the corridor behind the main hall, I found Dad waiting. Beckett stood behind him, arms folded like a bodyguard who wouldn't know what to do if I actually fought back. You embarrassed us tonight, Dad said, his voice low and venomous. No, I said, smiling just enough to hurt him. I embarrassed you. You did the rest yourself. He stepped closer. You think you've won something? These people don't care about you. They care about your trust. When you run it dry, they'll move on. Then I guess I'd better make every dollar count, I shot back. You should try it sometime. Beckett's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Maybe he knew words couldn't fix what he'd broken. Maybe he knew he'd already lost me for good. I brushed past them and didn't look back. When I reached the parking lot, the rain had stopped. I stood under the streetlight, feeling the cold drip off my hair, my suit clinging to my shoulders like a second skin. Mara pulled up, window rolled down. You look like a soaked saint, she said, grinning. Get in. I laughed so hard I nearly slipped on the pavement. The sound felt good. It felt like a promise that this war hadn't killed the part of me that still believed in tomorrow. Back at my apartment, I found another envelope under my door. This one was different. No threat, no scrawl, just a single typed line on crisp paper. We're not finished yet. No signature, but I didn't need one. Dad was consistent, if nothing else. I stuck the note on my mirror with tape. A reminder. A trophy. A spark. He wasn't finished. Good. Neither was I. I woke up the next morning feeling like my bones had been dipped in fire and ice all at once. My phone was a graveyard of missed calls. Dad, Beckett, even Mom. Though she never left a voicemail, I didn't listen to a single one. Instead, I rolled out of bed, made myself the strongest coffee my cheap old machine could manage, and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the note I'd taped to the fridge. We're not finished yet. I almost laughed. Good. I wasn't either. By mid-afternoon, the Boston Globe called again. They wanted a follow-up interview. A deep dive. They wanted to know who I was, who I really was. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut on them, keep the last bits of me for myself. But another part of me, the part they'd tried to bury all these years, wanted to swing it wide open. So I said yes. The reporter came by my apartment that evening. She was sharp-eyed and soft-spoken, with a way of asking questions that felt like gentle stabs to the heart. She asked about my family, about the wedding, about that day I'd walked across the graduation stage alone. It was like I was a ghost, I told her, my voice too calm for the storm in my chest. But the worst part wasn't being alone. It was knowing they didn't even feel guilty about it. She didn't look away. And now? Now? I traced the rim of my coffee cup. Now they want me to be quiet again. They want me to stay in my place. But I don't have a place in their story anymore. I'm writing my own. When the piece ran, it lit up every alumni network, every old Renshaw business circle, every backroom Dad had ever whispered deals in. My phone blew up. Some messages were cruel, accusing me of betrayal, calling me ungrateful, a spoiled brat airing family secrets for sympathy. Others were messages from strangers I'd never met. You're giving me hope. Keep going. Don't stop. Those I read twice. 2 days later, Sasha called. Her voice was a whip crack through the static of my overworked brain. Your father filed an emergency injunction to freeze the trust. He can't do that, I said, but my voice broke halfway through. Can he? He can try, she said. And he is. But it's a gamble. If the judge sides with you, it'll make him look desperate and petty. If the judge sides with him, well, then we go nuclear. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Nuclear. Great. Mara and I spent the next 48 hours holed up in her kitchen, pizza boxes and empty mugs stacked like barricades. I went over every transaction I'd made, every letter I'd signed, every public statement. We called students who'd already gotten emergency grants from my endowment push. I made them write statements. I called professors, alumni, anyone who could say, she did this for the right reasons. This humane ferie darbari, I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. I lived on adrenaline and bitterness, and the faint, terrifying thrill that maybe, just maybe, I could win this. The hearing for the injunction was held in a courthouse that smelled like old wood and older secrets. Dad sat at the front, Beckett at his side, arms crossed over a new suit that probably cost more than my entire apartment lease. Mom wasn't there. She never was. Not for the messy parts. I stood when the judge called my name. My lawyer made his argument, clear and calm. When Dad's lawyer spoke, he painted me as impulsive, reckless, emotionally unstable. He brought up my open letter, my interviews. He called me a loose cannon with access to millions. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward. My legs felt like they'd snap under me, but my voice didn't shake. I used those funds to do what my family promised they'd do. I gave help to people who needed it. People who didn't have fathers who could write million-dollar checks or brothers who could step aside for 5 minutes. I showed up when they didn't. I'm not reckless. I'm not unstable. I'm just tired of waiting for someone else to care. I didn't look at Dad. I looked at the judge, at the court clerk, at every single pair of eyes that had to see me now. The ruling wouldn't come for days, but I felt it in my bones the moment I stepped out into the spring sun. Win or lose, they couldn't unsee me now. They could drag my name through the mud, but I'd planted seeds that would keep growing long after they'd moved on to their next photo op. That night, I went to Mara's. She poured me wine and forced me to eat half a frozen lasagna. I sat on her couch, shoes kicked off, hair a mess, my blazer wrinkled from hours on courtroom benches. You did it, she said, nudging my shoulder. Even if they win the injunction, you showed the world who they really are. You showed the world who you really are. I'm so tired, I whispered, wine glass heavy in my hand. She took it from me, set it down, and pulled me into the kind of hug that makes your ribs ache with relief. Then rest. But tomorrow? You keep going. I didn't dream that night. Or if I did, they were dreams too deep to find me. When the ruling came 3 days later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, phone on speaker, Mara pacing behind me. Sasha's voice was a grin through the line. Judge ruled in your favor. The trust stays open. They're going to appeal, obviously. But for now, you won, Kala. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and down. I just sat there, staring at the dingy ceiling of my apartment, feeling every bruise on my heart pulse with something that felt like victory. I called Marianne that night. The board wants you at the annual summit, she said, her voice warm. They're talking about giving you a full seat, Kala, not just a figurehead. Real power. You ready for that? I looked at the notes still taped to my fridge. We're not finished yet. Yes, I said, my voice clear as glass. I'm ready. And I meant it. The day after the ruling, I woke up to a strange, unfamiliar quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of my parents' house where the silence meant you were failing to be perfect, but a gentle kind of quiet, the kind that let my shoulders drop for the first time in what felt like years. Mara had crashed on my couch again, a half-empty bag of chips balanced on her chest, a stack of legal printouts sliding to the floor by her feet. She'd stayed with me through every late-night email, every phone call that made my stomach knot with dread. When she stirred awake, she just blinked at me, hair sticking up like a halo gone rogue. You look calm, she said, yawning. Terrifying. I laughed. It was soft, real. I think I am. Calm, I mean, for now. But calm wasn't the same as done. I knew the appeals were coming. I knew my father would spend every dollar, every favor, every shadowy backroom connection to keep me in my place. But now the difference was clear. I wasn't in that place anymore. I was standing at the edge of it, torch in hand, ready to watch it burn if I had to. I spent the next few days working out of Mara's kitchen. She'd made it our unofficial war room. Index cards pinned to the fridge, my speech drafts stacked next to half-finished mugs of coffee, Sasha's notes scribbled on the backs of takeout menus. Every morning we made a ritual of it. Strong coffee, a blast of music, then 4 hours of fighting the good fight. Somewhere in the middle of this chaos, a package arrived for me. No return address, but I knew. I knew the moment I saw the thick envelope with my name scrawled in that heavy, familiar pen. Inside, copies of trust statements, highlighted in angry red marker. A single note on top. This isn't your legacy to ruin. I set it down on the counter. Mara read it over my shoulder, snorted, and ripped it in half. Correction. It's not his legacy anymore. It's yours. I smiled at her bravado, but inside, the weight of it settled like an iron crown on my head. I wasn't fighting for a seat at the table anymore. I was fighting to build the damn table. And every inch I gained felt like a mile my father was determined to drag me back by my ankles. 2 weeks later, the annual summit arrived. The same old donors, the same old rooms filled with old money and older grudges. But this time, they were different too. The whispers weren't about poor Kala Renshaw, the spare daughter nobody saw coming. They were about what I was doing, what I might do next. I stood backstage before my speech, staring at the sea of heads waiting for me. The lights made it hard to see anyone clearly. All those sharp suits, diamond earrings, polite smiles that could cut glass if you stepped out of line. But I'd already stepped so far out of line, there was no line left to find. Marianne squeezed my shoulder. You ready? I thought about my father's scrawl. This isn't your legacy to ruin, I smiled. It is now. When I stepped out, the hush was immediate. This wasn't the gala, or the retreat, or an interview I could edit in post. This was live, raw, impossible to take back. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought they might see it through my blazer. I know what they say about me, I began, voice strong, steady. They say I'm the Renshaw who talks too much, the one who didn't know her place, the one who can't stop airing dirty laundry. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. Good. Let them squirm. I'm not here to protect the comfort of people who built their comfort on silence. I'm here because every dollar we spend, every brick we build, every student we lift up deserves the truth. Not polished plaques and smiling family portraits. The truth. I saw Beckett, halfway down the aisle, jaw tight as stone. Dad wasn't here. He'd sent his lawyer in his place. Mom, of course, was nowhere to be found. Her silence had always been the loudest thing in the room. I finished my speech with the same words that had carried me this far. If you're not willing to show up when it's ugly, you don't get to stand in the light when it's beautiful. They didn't stand. They didn't whoop or holler like I'd fantasized in my dorm room all those nights ago. But they clapped. They clapped like they saw me. Really saw me. And for once, that was enough. Afterwards, Mara found me in the corridor. tears smudging her mascara, the proudest grin I'd ever seen on her face. "You did that," she whispered, voice rough. "They can't take it back," Sasha called that night. "He's going to hit back, Kala. The appeals are moving fast. They're going to try to prove you're mismanaging the funds. We're ready, but brace yourself." "I'm braced," I said, staring at my reflection in Mara's bathroom mirror. "Tell him to bring it." The next morning, the phone calls started again. Business partners who'd once tripped over themselves to shake my father's hand now wanted Danae Situana at their tables. Journalists wanted more quotes, more photos, more dirt. Some were vultures. Some were sincere. I learned to spot the difference. One night, weeks into the mess, a letter arrived that nearly made me drop my coffee. It was from a student I'd never met, a girl from the Midwest who'd gotten an emergency grant when her father lost his job. "You saved my semester," asterisk, she wrote. "You made me feel like I was worth seeing. I don't know if you'll win, but I hope you don't give up." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it up and slipped it into my wallet. A talisman, proof that what I was fighting for mattered more than any family name. The next hearing loomed like a thundercloud. Mara packed her overnight bag without asking, dropping it by my door. Sasha sent me bullet points, her words crisp and clear. "No matter what they throw, you answer with facts. They want you to crack on the stand. Don't." When the day came, I walked into that marble courtroom in the same navy suit I'd worn to the donor retreat. I wanted Dad to see that the girl he'd tried to erase had survived in the same clothes he'd called cheap. This time, Mom was there. She sat behind Dad, her face drawn tight, eyes flicking up at me like maybe she wished she could smile, could reach out, could say "Prai-Fitri." But silence was her legacy too, and she wore it like pearls around her throat. On the stand, Dad's lawyers fired questions like bullets. Did I understand the size of the funds I'd handled? Did I comprehend the legal risk? Did I have experience? Had I let my emotions cloud my judgment? I answered every question. Calm. Direct. I told them about the students, the grants, the letters like the one in my wallet. I told them about standing alone on my graduation day and realizing that no one was ever coming to save me except me. I didn't look at Dad once. Not until the last question, when his lawyer asked if I regretted any of it. I met Dad's eyes then, steady, unblinking. "No," I said, "not one bit." When the judge called a recess, I stepped outside, the spring breeze slicing through the heat under my collar. Mara came out, phone buzzing in her hand. "They're cornered," she whispered, eyes wide. "Sasha says they know they're losing ground." I leaned against the courthouse wall, the city spinning around me like a carousel. I felt every bruise, every sleepless night, every inch of the uphill climb. But under it all, I felt stronger than I ever had before. I thought about that first empty seat at my graduation, how the echoes had swallowed me, how I'd promised myself I'd never feel that small again. I kept that promise. I left the courthouse that day with the spring wind whipping through my hair and my pulse hammering in my ears. Every step down those marble steps felt like stomping through wet cement that was trying to harden around my ankles. But I didn't slow down. I kept moving, even when Beckett called after me from the top of the steps. "Kola!" His voice bounced off the stone columns. "Wait up!" I turned, my hands shoved into my coat pockets so he wouldn't see them trembling. He jogged down to me, all tailored suit and teeth he hadn't had to pay for. "You made your point," he said, the grin brittle at the edges. "Dad's not going to back down, you know. He'll fight you until you break." I tilted my head. "Good. Let him try." He laughed like we were old friends sharing a joke. "Why are you doing this, really? You think these people at Harvard really care about you? They're going to drop you the second you stop being the shiny new story." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer so he could see the flicker behind my eyes, that small, bright flame he'd tried to snuff out since we were kids. "But at least I'll know I did something real, something more than standing next to Dad in another family photo no one wants to hang up." He looked away then, out across the city skyline. I thought for a moment he might say something true, something raw. But Beckett was a ghost in expensive shoes. He could only haunt the edges of honesty for so long. Take the buyout, he said instead, his voice flat. End it. Walk away with your trust fund. You can live your little independent life and pretend you did something brave. No, I said. I don't want their money. I want my name back. He flinched like I'd slapped him, but I didn't wait for him to recover. I turned, my shoes scuffing the courthouse steps like a signature no lawyer could erase. Mara was waiting by her car, leaning against the door, arms crossed. He tries to talk you down? I nodded. He tried. He failed. She grinned. That's my girl. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. Not deep, never deep. Not with the war still smoldering under my skin, but clean, dreamless. When I woke, the sun was spilling through the grimy kitchen window in a way that made the whole world look like it hadn't decided whether to love me or destroy me yet. I figured that was fair. Sasha called that morning with the next move. We need to get ahead of their PR spin. They're going to make you look unstable, entitled, petty, like you're dismantling your father's legacy out of spite. We counter it. You need to show people exactly where this money is going. No more vague promises. I'll go public again, I said. My stomach twisted at the thought of cameras, microphones, headlines, that would turn my face into a headline instead of a human. But I knew it was the only way. We set up a town hall at Harvard, an open Q&A, press welcome. I was terrified no one would show. But they did. They filled the lecture hall. Students, faculty, local reporters, with notepads poised like knives. I stood at the podium, a single page of notes trembling in my hand. I know you've heard a lot about me these past few months, I began. Some of it's true, some of it isn't. But here's what's real. My father built his legacy on the idea that his money made him untouchable. I'm building mine on the idea that no one should be. I talked about the emergency funds, the grants that kept students from dropping out when their families let them down. I read letters, anonymized, but real. I told them how it felt to be invisible in a room full of people clapping for someone else. And when the first reporter asked, "Aren't you afraid of losing everything?" I didn't hesitate. Everything? I echoed. If standing up for myself means losing people who never really saw me, then I'm not losing anything, I'm gaining me. The next morning, the papers called me defiant. Some called me a firebrand. Some said I was the beginning of the end for the old guard who'd run the boardrooms since they learned to sign their names in gold ink. For the first time, I liked what they called me. But the pushback came too. It always does. Dad's lawyers filed another motion, this one accusing me of wanton mismanagement. The word made me laugh. Mara made stickers that read, "Try so wanton woman," and slapped one on my laptop. I stuck another on my front door like a badge of honor. The next court date was worse than the last. They called in old friends, people I'd grown up calling uncle and auntie, who now sat there under oath, shaking their heads like they'd ever known the first thing about me. Kala was always difficult, one man said, voice dripping with manufactured regret. Always chasing attention, always wanting more than her place. My place. That word again. Like I was born into a corner and should be grateful for the shadows. When it was my turn to respond, I didn't get angry, I didn't cry, I just smiled. A small thing that hurt my cheeks because I hadn't used it this way in so long. "Thank you for reminding me who I'm not," I said. "You helped me more than you know." The judge didn't rule that day, they never do. But as I walked out, the reporters didn't chase Dad's lawyer. They chased me. Microphones in my face, flashes stinging my eyes. I didn't run. I stood there, told them what I'd said inside, word for word. I watched my father's allies melt into the marble walls like they'd never really been there at all. Back in my apartment that night, Mara made me ramen noodles, and we ate on the floor because my tiny table was covered in legal folders and half-empty coffee mugs. She raised her plastic fork like a toast. "To being difficult," she said. I clinked mine against hers. To being difficult. When I checked my email before bed, there was a message from an old high school friend I hadn't heard from in years. We'd sat together at lunch every day because she was the only other kid whose parents never showed up at school plays. Her note was short. Just 4 words. "I see you now." I closed my laptop and lay back. the ramen heavy in my belly, the warmth of that single sentence heavier still. There was so much more to fight, but for now I let myself believe I might just win. In the days leading up to the final ruling, it felt like the whole city was holding its breath with me. My phone buzzed nonstop, reporters wanting quotes, students emailing thank yous, lawyers triple-checking statements. And then there were the messages from Dad's side, veiled threats, whispered reminders that the Renshaw name was bigger than me, that I'd drown trying to fight it. But I'd stopped believing that lie the moment they left me standing alone at my graduation. I'd survived my family's absence before. I could survive their rage now. Mara and Sasha stayed glued to my side. Mara turned my living room into a fortress of takeout boxes and highlighter-marked contracts. Sasha spread spreadsheets across my floor, like battle maps. Every time I started to doubt myself, they reminded me who I'd become. Not Graham Renshaw's daughter, not Beckett's forgotten sister, but Calla. Whole, sharp, unignorable. The morning of the ruling, I put on my Navy suit one last time. The same suit I'd worn to the donor gala, the first hearing, the retreat, each thread soaked with every fear I'd refused to keep carrying. I pinned my hair back and met Mara's eyes in the mirror. "Whatever happens," she said, her voice steady, even if her fingers trembled where they gripped my shoulder. "You did this. Not them, you." I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left for them. I saved them from me, for the girl who'd walked across that empty stage and refused to vanish afterward. The courthouse buzzed when I arrived. Reporters lined the sidewalk like a fence of flashing bulbs. Beckett and Dad stood by the front steps, Dad stone-faced, Beckett hiding his tension behind that lazy grin. Mom wasn't there, of course. Her absence had always been the loudest sound. Inside, I sat at the plaintiff's table while Sasha whispered last-minute reminders. My heart thudded like a drum in my throat, but my hands didn't shake when the judge entered. The ruling didn't come in a sweeping monologue like in the movies. It came in clipped, precise words. The court finds that Miss Calla Renshaw acted within her authority as trustee. The motion to remove her is denied. I didn't hear anything else for a moment. Just the rush of blood in my ears, the sudden, dizzying realization that I'd done it. I'd won. Dad didn't look at me when it was over. He brushed past, the scent of his expensive cologne still clinging to old ghosts. Beckett gave me a half smile, but I didn't give him one back. We were done pretending we owed each other anything. Outside, cameras flashed. Questions flew. I stepped to the mic, Sasha at my elbow, Mara beaming behind me. "I stood alone once," I said, my voice echoing off the stone facade. "And I promised myself I'd never feel invisible again. Today, I kept that promise." The next week blurred in a whirl of signatures and settlements. I didn't bleed my father dry, though I could have. I didn't want his empire. I wanted what I'd fought for. Control of my share. My power. My right to decide where the Renshaw name went next. By spring, my new student initiative was rolling out in full. Emergency stipends, mentorship programs, a startup incubator for students who'd never see a dime of family wealth. My name sat beside the project's title, not his. Marianne called me late one night after the official board vote. "It's done," she said, a smile in her voice. "They're naming the new wing after you. Not Graham, not Beckett, you." I sat on my tiny couch, staring at the city lights blinking through my window, and laughed so hard I nearly scared myself. It wasn't about the stone or the plaque. It was about the echo. The proof that no one could erase me again. Beckett sent flowers the day the announcement went public. A sleek card tucked inside read, "No hard feelings. Let's talk soon." I didn't call him. Some doors don't need to stay open. Dad didn't say anything. Not a letter, not a call, not a threat scrawled in thick black ink. I think in his own twisted way he understood. I hadn't ruined his legacy. I'd just stopped letting him use mine. The night before the opening of the new center, Mara and I sat on my roof, legs dangling over the ledge, cheap wine warm in our hands. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" she asked, soft as the wind. I thought about Mom's silence, Beckett's smug dismissals, Dad's thunderous threats. I thought about that empty chair at my graduation, and how it had become a throne instead of a tombstone. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think I'll forgive me first. She clinked her glass against mine, eyes shining. To you, Kala, to the girl who made them see her. To me, I whispered, and to everyone who comes after me. May they never feel invisible again. The next morning, the new wing opened. I stood at the podium, the dean at my side, students crowding the quad. I looked out at them. Faces bright with possibility, some familiar, some strangers who'd one day remember my name not because it was carved in stone, but because it cracked open a door they'd been told was locked forever. This isn't just my story, I told them. It's yours now. Use it well. And as the cameras clicked and the applause rose, I felt it. That empty chair at my graduation finally filled. Not by my parents, not by my brother, but by me. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.